Hello, Philippines, and welcome to the World News Jam right here on DZRJ and RJTV. My name is Eric Lecain. We are talking about interesting stories that are going on around the world this week. And I am joined, as always, with Mr. Dan Kang joining us this week. Now, we always do on our segment here, Where in the World is Dan Kang? Where in the world is Dan Kang today?
I am back in Manila. I'm here for the big Amet Cup female amateur pool tournament where we sponsor a lot of the up-and-coming superstars in billiards. So I'm back in Manila, my second home.
Yes, in case any of you are joining us for the first time, Dan Kang helps a lot of our young billiards players. He is a businessman and a world traveler, but he does take his time to help the young billiards players here in the Philippines. I, of course, Dan, today am actually traveling, so I am remotely, although it looks like you are remotely. But yes, I'm traveling a little bit down in Cebu today. But at least we are not in or anywhere near the Mayan volcano, which is our first piece today. That Mayan volcano looks like it's going to blow. That's out there in Bicol. People near the volcano have already started evacuating.
Yeah, the Bicolana disaster is about to happen. Hopefully, it doesn't get too bad.
Hopefully, it doesn't. But supposedly, this volcano there was first recorded eruption in 1766. Although some say there was a big eruption in 1616, but I don't know who is alive still to be able to tell that story. But the big eruption there was in 1814, where it killed around 1,200 people. But in case, it might be firing off here in the Philippines very soon, because right now they are on alert level number 3.
Wow, that's substantial.
I mean, that's the last news that I got. I don't know what it's changed to, but it looks like, according to what they were saying, the officials were saying there, that it looks like it has finally reached its point, and it looks like it's gonna blow. So I would
at least say no.
Mayan volcano.
At least we have some forewarning, not like the 𝗡𝗲𝘄𝘀 volcano that blew several years ago. That just happened like spontaneously.
Or earthquakes and volcanoes. Very interesting, difficult to predict, especially here in the Philippines. But some of the things are actually going well. Some of the things are going the things that were volcanoes, and that is the daily COVID cases in the Philippines are down now, maybe 22%. Daily average in the Philippines now is 1,300, and 10 deaths between May 22nd and June 4th, which is not bad. So things are slowly, we've been waiting for years for the COVID to finally kind of dissipate. And it looks like in the Philippines, they got enough people vaccinated, and it looks like the daily cases is going down.
Well, you and I, we reported so much on the daily counts and everything else when that first happened. I actually just got really burned out of following the numbers. And for a while there, we didn't even know if any of those numbers were accurate. It was just a big jumble of a mess. I didn't know they were still actually ongoing, keeping track and record of that.
I know. When I saw that story, I'm like, wow, we're still counting.
Yeah,
we're still counting the numbers. Because for a while, because we were reporting here on the World News Jam on COVID, for a while there, every single week was the big story, taking up most of the time here. And then eventually it was like, all right, this COVID's still here. All right, on to the next story. We kind of fell out of it, but now a little bit of good news.
Interestingly enough, I just read some article that the COVID numbers are rising in China.
Now,
and I only read
that I could believe.
I only read that because I was scheduled to go to China not too long ago, so I was doing all my research on what the newest updated policies were, and I read that whole article that the numbers are really rising substantially in China. So,
I mean, it just goes by common logic that that's going to happen in China, because when you lock down a billion people for as long as they did, and then all of a sudden you let them out, the COVID virus, here in the Philippines and in the United States and across Europe, we've kind of like now people are getting immune to the virus. But in China, they're not immune yet, because they've been sitting at home for the last couple of years with their zero COVID policy that they had there, which turned out to be not such a great idea for China. But they have up a little bit on that and letting people out. And so now everybody's getting it.
Sure. I've had it like 3 times already.
They have a what?
I've had it like 3 times already.
Oh.
The one in the strain in Korea has just become like a temporary, like the symptoms are temporary, like temporary tonsillitis, really, really bad sore throat for like 2 or 3 days.
Yeah.
And then a headache, and then it's gone within 4 days. So, it's become, fortunately for us.
Yeah, at least, in the Philippines, they've gotten a lot of people vaccinated, which, speaking of vaccines, Dan, there is a new vaccine that's coming out in Vietnam against the African swine fever. It's very close to approval. In what they call a major breakthrough to tackle the deadly animal disease that regularly ravages pig farms worldwide, the African swine fever.
That's the swine flu, right?
Yeah, swine flu, same thing.
Swine fever, swine flu.
So it does. People can get it, but it's not deadly to people like it is to pigs. For the last couple of years, what do they think? $250 billion in the global pork market disappeared because of this thing. The worst outbreak was in 2018, 2019. About half the domestic pig population in China died. So,
I remember.
And China is the biggest producer of pigs. Supposedly lost them about 100 million.
Yeah. So I know Philippines. Philippines, Korea, we eat a lot of pork.
Yeah,
so it's substantial, and
we love our pork here in the Philippines.
It's interesting that Vietnam, that I never knew Vietnam was in research for swine flu vaccine.
That is the place. That is the place where the U.S. companies are trying to pull it. But they said that after decades of failed attempts due to the problem is the virus is very complex. 2 vaccines have been developed by U.S. scientists and are being tested in these large pilot schemes by Vietnamese companies. And they are shown to be very promising. Because they say in just 2021, 103 million pigs died. So this is good news to all you pigs that might be listening to our show today, that you have a vaccine coming soon for your swine flu.
I mean, economically, world economics, I'm sure, is going to be affected by that as well.
Well, pigs cost money.
Yeah,
if all your pigs are dying, that's, what did they say? $100 billion that China lost last year, or a couple of years before last, on just pigs dying. So, and speaking of big pigs, Boris Johnson, one of our favorite guys here on the show, with one of the best hairstyles I have seen of any world leader. This was kind of a last-minute story I added because it was just announced that he has been forced out of Parliament. He has decided to resign altogether from Parliament because I think that they really come down on that lie that he told about the going to the parties. Which seems, when you look at world leaders, and why they have to resign and why they've been thrown out of office, it's just kind of funny that this is what is forcing Boris Johnson out of office.
You get like the extremes from both sides, right? I mean, one can commit like atrocities and still go, and one can go to a party and get forced out. It's just...
forced out. You know,
Unreal,
and
right?
you lied about going to that party, and you know you did. And Boris is like,
Yeah.
actually, here's what Boris said. Boris said, they are determined to use the proceedings against me to drive me out of parliament. They have not produced a shred of evidence that I knowingly or recklessly misled the Commons on that party situation. So, uh, but you know,
My God.
it really wasn't. It wasn't just Partygate. I mean, there was a bunch of. He had a whole. He was starting to like rack up the scandals there. His deputy chief, you know, was groping women or groping boys, or I said something about that. It was a couple of issues that he had, and you know, after that prime minister, right after him, after he was forced to resign from from being prime minister, and then Liz Truss came in, and how long was she prime minister? 5 minutes.
Yeah.
You know, he was supposed he was supposed to be prime minister again, but it was just too much with the Partygate and the other issues. So stuck him back in parliament. But now it looks like he's just too much damaged goods, and he has decided to get himself out of parliament.
I really enjoy watching Parliament. It's kind of a great.
It is a blast.
I love it. You know, they just start yelling at each other and like, oh, I love it. It's a great show.
You get you sit down in the chair, and then you say your piece or whatever, and then you get up, and then they boo you, and then they say, you know, they catcall you, and then they say how horrible you are, and then you come back down with this giant book, and you open the giant book, and you go, well, let me say that, let me say this about you, and then you close your big book, and then you walk off, and then the other guy comes on. It's really
a giant comedy skit, and it's amazing to think that in this day and age, that's how they run government, right? It's just unreal. I mean, it's a little bit above what I saw in South America, where these, I guess, the two political opponents get into a ring and they actually duke it out. They actually fight, and the winner wins the, you know, that plot of land where they're gonna put the, you know, the pipage and the sewage in. This is real, though. This is real in South America.
I wish they would do that. There was so many elections in the United States. I wish they would let them do that.
That's reality.
But so anyway, so that's one. You know, we really enjoyed being able to talk about Boris Johnson for so many years because he's such a fun guy to talk about. But speaking of that, Dan, I have a trivia question to ask you, Dan. Let's see if you can get this right. Dan, please name an ex-U.S. president that has been indicted for not only a state crime, but now a federal crime.
Well, you know, we couldn't talk about Boris Johnson in Europe and not point our finger towards America with Trump. Of course not. Yes. But which reminds me that during the COVID time with Trump and Boris Johnson together was kind of the dual fiasco. You know, that was
piece of work. Yeah, watching those guys work together during COVID or not work together, however you want to look at it. Yeah, but it was in any case, I'm assuming you guessed Donald Trump. I don't know who else you would guess. But the U.S. has now joined the ranks of many countries around the world that go after their leaders after they leave office. Countries like South Korea or the Philippines.
Or the Philippines, yeah.
So, you know, all right. So if you remember a few weeks ago, just in case you haven't been watching the show.
Remind us, please, again.
Let me just run it down really quick again. Why Donald Trump is now under a federal indictment in the United States, you know, after being indicted for fraud in New York. Actually, you know what? He was indicted for something that's kind of weird, Dan. It's espionage, which you don't hear that a whole lot. But when Trump, when he left office, he took some documents, took some classified documents, took some very, very top secret classified documents. Now, when a president leaves office in the United States, they pack up a lot of stuff, a lot of possible classified stuff gets mixed in with the other stuff. It happens. And they're either found by the president or they're missing the document in the National Archives. And they say, could you please return it? And this is the way it goes. And it's never been a problem until now, because Trump, turns out, purposefully, they have now shown, took top secret files home with him on purpose. So afterwards, the National Archives said, please return those documents. They are not yours. They belong to the United States. Trump didn't return them. And they said, well, listen, all right, you have to return those documents. There's no, like, you can't just keep them and be, your Donald Trump self. And so he goes, okay. So he returned some boxes of documents. And then the officials were like, wait a minute, where's all the good stuff? I mean, we checked it. There's some stuff missing, a lot of stuff missing. And so here's a subpoena, Donald Trump, that says you must return these documents under penalty of law. So we are coming down to get them. And so at some point at that time, Trump and one of his buddies there, they moved the documents from where they were so that they didn't, they were supposed to be in this this closet. And so they moved the documents. And so that has turned out to be an issue. And so when they went down, they couldn't find the documents. Obviously, the FBI went in later with the search warrant and searched his place. But it turns out that when he first brought them down, I mean, some of these documents are super top classified. He had them, they put them on a stage where they had wedding parties at his place. They put him in his office, somewhere in a storage room, somewhere in his bedroom, somewhere in the bathroom. Some they put them in a box in the shower. And I was thinking, can you imagine, because they have guests, like it's a steady stream of guests in there. You go, you sit down on the toilet and you're looking for something to read, and you reach over, you open a box and you pull out this document and go, I wonder what this is. Implanted spies in Russia. Here is a list of names.
It wasn't Esquire magazine.
Talk
about some interesting stuff to read in the John, huh?
So that
I think he publicly admitted to having them, which, I mean,
this is the problem that Trump has now, because people say, oh, this is just so silly. The Republicans are like, this is nothing. That's what Trump was saying for a while. This is nothing. But they have a tape. They have a tape of Trump, and we talked about this before, in which he had a document in his New Jersey resort that he was waving around. That was the U.S. in plans for invasion of Iran. And this is the thing. If you have these documents, these top secret documents, and you show them to someone who does not have clearance, that is espionage, and that is worth up to 10 years.
Exactly the point that I wanted to make was that, there are still supporters that would believe that it's not a big deal, or they would run with that and say that there's those top secret files are something that we should know, and that they're, maybe he has them because he wants to expose that to the public, all of these things that the public should know, that the American people have a right to know, which in that very collective of people that would support something like that is the very definition of espionage. This is the very definition of espionage. If you knowingly think that those secrets should be, available for the public, where people can actually take that information and do damage to the American people, which obviously that is, I mean, all of that holds so much power to actually, have a negative effect on the American people and the country itself. We can't say that there aren't going to be people that would try to use it for their own advantage, for personal gain or whatever else. Crazy.
Donald Trump? Is that what you're saying? Like Donald Trump?
This is the definition of espionage.
There's an argument that's going around that, well, what does the U.S. have to hide? At least Donald Trump has this, he's going to tell us what's going on behind it. But the thing is, a lot of the things he took nuclear secrets from other countries. He took lists of names from other, he has the plans for going to war with invading Iran. I mean, these are kind of things that we don't need to know, things that the public should not know. The public doesn't need to know certain secrets that our military has.
It's funny because I had some conversations a while back with some friends, and we were talking about covert operations that the government does, and they're like, "Well, why can't we know what they're doing?" It's well, that's the reason it's covert, because we're not supposed to know what they're doing, and you know, like if we're going after outlaws or something else, we can't publicly, you know, announce that we're going after Bin Laden. You know, let's say hello.
Because Bin Laden might be listening. Yeah. So the same way with, you know, now that Iran knows that we had plans to invade them, and Trump is just, you know, flailing that document around showing, hey, you know what? Don't you want to see this? This is like top secret, you know. You know, and I'm sure Iran is like, well, wait a minute, you know, this is you know, it makes things very difficult for us. And people are saying, well, you know, Trump didn't know. He didn't know what. According to the recorded messages, the recordings that they have, he was saying to that person, hey, you know what? I'm not supposed to have this. This is highly classified. So the argument that he said before about that he has the ability to declassify stuff as soon as he removes it, that is not true based on what he said. Which is the problem that Trump has with a lot of these things. You know, if Trump had of just, when they said, okay, listen, we know you have these documents, just give them back. He'd give them back, the whole thing would have been swept under the rug. Nothing would have ever happened. But he wouldn't give them back. And then he and his boy like tried to hide them. So that's, you know, here now you've got a conspiracy charge. There are, in this whole thing, there are 37 counts of handling classified documents, obstruction of justice, and the fact that these will fall into the Espionage Act, which, you know, because he had possession of national defense information, which is top secret. And if you do the math, and you know, you go in, you start looking at the math, he's looking at 70 years in prison if he's found guilty. Yeah, if he was a baby, by the time he gets out, he would qualify to be a president in 70 years, because that's how old our presidents are nowadays. You know, this ain't like mom's, you know, recipe for chocolate chip cookies. You know what I mean? And you know what? You do espionage, that's added 10 years. If you do obstruction, that's added 20 years. But the indictment, which actually, you know, the indictment that they sent, it's only 44 pages, and it's double spaced. It's easy to read if you want to read it. But it has a lot of stuff in it. I was really surprised looking through this indictment that, you know, it included information regarding defense and weapons capabilities, both the U.S. and other countries, U.S. nuclear secrets that he had, potential vulnerabilities of the U.S. and its allies if they are attacked, plans for retaliation in response in case that a foreign entity attacks the United States. I mean, it's really, you know, it's juicy stuff.
Yeah, what could be going through your mind that you think you could have those documents, or they're not going to be missing them?
Well, yeah, I mean, that's what I was thinking. You know, how would and when supposedly when they first wrote to Trump was with in a meeting with his lawyer, and he said, "Hey, let's just not answer it. Let's just not answer the subpoena, and say, and let's go. You know, maybe it'll just go away." He goes, "Why don't you take these documents and just, you know," and he made some kind of hand gesture, like make them kind of disappear. Which is why I think as soon as he was indicted, two of his lawyers quit, because Trump is like implicating his lawyers in his, like, you know, illegal crimes, and which is the same thing as the guy. There's another guy. It's Trump's valet, his valet, who's also been charged with espionage. So here you've got Trump, who is the ex-president of the United States, and then you have his like sidekick, like his valet, who he asked to move the boxes. And the reason the valet is in trouble is he lied. He lied. They asked him, you know, did you do this for the president? He's like, oh, I don't.
I'm just parking cars, man. I didn't know that was in the trunk.
Can't recall.
Unreal.
So, yeah, I mean, the whole thing, you know, here's the crazy thing. So at one point, I mean, you couldn't write this as a script in a movie. At one point, the guy who was taking care of the pool was, you know, this guy, they drained the pool for some reason right when the government was subpoenaing the video, the closed circuit television video that was recorded, and it was in a room. All the recorded video was in a room. Well, all of a sudden at that moment, they decided to drain the pool outside, and somehow the water from the pool went into the room where the video was being kept. And so a lot of the video got destroyed because of the pool water. And so now they're looking into, did they purposely drain the pool like on that and make sure that the water ran in, do you think?
This is like a bad version of when Hillary Clinton was hammering all her phones, and it's the worst version of that. What's going on with this, man? And you know what? What's the end game? Is it his run for presidency, using the fact that he cannot be, prosecuted once he becomes a president? Is he using that what is the end game here? That's unreal.
Here is, there's even more twist to the story. There's more twist.
Right.
First thing, so Trump has to turn himself in on Tuesday, where he'll get fingerprinted and mugshot and all that stuff, I think. But this case is not in Washington, D.C. This case is in Florida, because that's where Trump's home is. It's in Florida. Right. But here's the rub. Here's what's even better than the fact that they drained the pool and it went into the room, the exact room where all the video was that they were subpoenaing from the government. The federal judge that was picked for this trial is a Trump-appointed judge, the same judge that we talked about here on the show like 5 or 6 months ago that rendered that horrible decision on the same case before. Now, her decisions before were overturned by other Republican judges. In fact, both of her decisions were overturned. But she turned out that she was like, people couldn't believe how bad a judge that she was, and she was appointed by Trump. And so people are like, well, okay. She's obviously showing favoritism toward Trump, because she said that when the documents were found by the FBI, that they must be looked over first by an independent counsel. And so the other judges were like, no, that's not what's going to happen. And so they appealed, and they won on appeal. And so they didn't have to do that. She has the judge that has been picked for this trial, and supposedly it's random. But people are saying that she should recuse herself because she's part of it. She's part of the whole thing. She's already been accused of showing favoritism toward Trump in the last thing. So people are wondering like what she's going to do. And here, anyway, getting back to your point, it's true what you were saying is if this goes to trial before the election, and it is espionage. Now, like you were saying, espionage used to be firing squad. If you were guilty of espionage, it was either hanging or firing squad. So I don't know that they are going to do that to an ex-president. But if that particular judge can delay this trial enough and Trump can win the election, then the whole thing will just disappear. It will just disappear.
Yeah, the election will be based on desperado. He'll be a despot. He'll be like, you have to vote for me or else they're going to kill me.
You know what else is very interesting, Dan, is the fact that, and people have brought this up before, Trump may have pardoned himself before when he was president. He may have given himself a pardon for anything that he might have done in life. And he may pull that out later. And then we're going to have to, experts are going to have to come in, and the Supreme Court is going to have to come in and saying, is this possible that you can pardon yourself? Because theoretically, it is possible that a president can pardon himself. He can pardon any U.S. citizen.
I think it is, actually. I think so. I read there was that question somewhere, I can't remember, that came up about presidents pardoning themselves. I think there is.
And could you pardon yourself, put the pardon in your desk drawer, and just wait till you do something really bad, and then pull it out and go, wait a minute, can't convict me. I have a pardon of myself. So anyway, that's where we are currently on the Trump situation now. Right now, the other issue being that Trump, he was found liable for sexual assault recently. And now he's trying to get that. He won. He had to pay $5 million, so he's trying to get that lowered to $1 million. So Trump has got all kinds of problems coming out of his ears right now. He's got the Georgia case that's also coming up and the January 6th case that's also coming up. And can he get indicted and can he get tried before the election? So let the circus begin.
I don't think any of the other charges will even holds a candle to the espionage charge. It'll be all concurrent.
I mean, the thing, and I'll finish this up really quick. The thing about the espionage charge is they really got him good.
Yeah.
How they're going to get out of this, I don't know what the lawyer. I mean, his two lawyers quit on the day he got indicted. Because what are they going to do? What is the, how are they going to fight this? They've just been so good. So this is going to be the interesting thing to see. That's why I said, let the circus begin, because, it's going to be great. I mean, the dam is open now. And speaking of dams, this is my segue, Dan. Speaking of dams, the Ukrainian dam broke this week. The largest dam in the Ukraine. It broke and collapsed. It's the single biggest industrial and ecological disaster in all of Europe in the past decades. It has destroyed entire villages, flooded farmland, deprived tens of thousands of people of power, clean water, caused massive environmental damage. So was it Russia?
That's I was just question. From heavy rains. What happened?
Russia? I mean, as what I would say, of course it was, but we actually really don't know. We don't know why the dam broke because Russia has control of the area. So the inspectors can go in and check it. So it just had structural failure. And this, and I make it sound like, it's just a dam broke. But this dam is enormous. And the fact that it would break right as the Ukrainians are doing the Russian counteroffensive in Russia, and they are attacking different spots in Russia. And now all of a sudden, one of the largest dams, the largest dam in Ukraine, one of the largest dams in Europe, all of a sudden breaks. And so, the UN secretary said, well, this devastation is another consequence of the Russian invasion. But
really?
He said that, but then in the very next sentence, he goes, but, we can't verify that actually was Russia.
So, I mean, that's kind of a big that's a big
coincidental.
Yeah.
Coinkydink is the word I was trying to find.
Kind of like the Wuhan lab being right to the wet market.
It was caused by, some animal in a cage in the exact town where they have the virus that's named, the virus lab that's named after the virus that is. So, yes, it's just a big, coincidence that dam would just happen to collapse now. Right as Ukraine is doing there. And of course, President Zelensky of the Ukraine said, this was Russia. This was definitely Russia. They've had control of that dam for a year. They had plenty of time to plant explosives near the dam. And many people said that they heard explosives firing off. So, things that make you go, Dan.
I'm sure that was always some kind of a strategic a move, an option that they had sitting and waiting for. So,
I know. I mean, this dam blowing up, I mean, irrigation systems have been left without water. The nuclear power plant is left without cooling water. I mean, this is Europe's largest nuclear power station, not Ukraine. Europe's largest nuclear power station has to find a different way of getting water. So now, of course, the Russians are claiming, well, it was the Ukrainians. The Ukrainians built their own dam, and just so they could say that it was us.
Of course. Do we really know?
No evidence whatsoever that this happened. Because, part of the reason, that the Russians are saying it's the Ukrainians is the Russians, they took over Crimea back in 2014. And the first thing the Ukrainians did was cut the water off. And so the Russians have been able to divert the water from the dam back to Crimea so they can have water there now. And so they're saying that the Ukrainians blew up the dam, but to stop them, to mess up the water supply in Crimea. But that is kind of an insane thought that the Ukrainians would do that to themselves.
And then blame us.
I don't know. So anyway, things are getting kind of dangerous there in the Ukraine with the dam situation. which speaking of being dangerous in water, you know where the most dangerous place to swim right now is, Dan? And if you get this right, Dan, I'll get a gold star. The most dangerous place to swim right now is the Red Sea. And the reason it's so dangerous to swim in the Red Sea is because the Red Sea is now red because sharks are killing people there.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So this is a crazy story that came out this week. A Russian, it's so ironic, isn't it? A Russian was killed this week by a shark in the Red Sea.
I thought it was the Dead Sea. Dead Sea is kind of dangerous.
Change the name of it to the Dead Sea. But there was a tiger shark swimming in the Red Sea, and it, of course, was looking at all the people that were swimming there and going, hey, you know what? I think there's a Russian in here. I'm going after that guy. And so the tiger shark went after the Russian and munched him, and so he's now dead. But what they did was they captured the tiger shark to make sure that it was that shark, which reminded me of that movie Jaws. Remember in the movie Jaws when they captured the shark to see if the little Kintner boy was inside the shark, the tiger shark, and they cut the tiger shark open and the Kintner boy was not in it, and they go, there's another shark out there.
And gas cans and all kinds of stuff come out of that shark.
Plate. But as it turned out, I did not know this, Dan, that in 2022, 2 women were killed by a shark in the Red Sea. And in 2020, a Ukrainian boy lost his arm in the Red Sea. And in 2018, a Czech tourist was also killed. So, you know, sharks like the taste of Eastern Europeans, it turns out.
But there's a lot of people, a lot of tourists that frolic in the waters of the Red Sea, isn't there?
Europeans to frolic. So you know, I didn't know there were lots of sharks in the Red Sea, but it turns out there are.
Absolutely.
So if you're out there, if you're swimming in the Red Sea, anybody who's listening to the show, watch out for sharks.
Sure. There's a lot of tourists that swim in that sea. So
you know,
it's bound to happen. Australia
gives it its name. It's named the Red Sea. But speaking of being red, Shanghai, going over to China there, has recorded its hottest day ever in 100 years. At 36.7, they had their hottest day in May there in Shanghai, and scientists are saying this is because of global warming.
Of course. I think Korea had their hottest day like 2 years ago. That happened.
I mean, everybody's breaking records. Southeast Asia and Asia this week have had some of the hottest temperatures ever. The old record, 35.7, which was recorded actually in the only few times that they've been this hot is 1876. I don't know what was going on in 1876, but Shanghai is breaking its records.
Yeah, in recorded history. So.
Yeah, I mean, how
long have they been recording that though?
So I guess we can't look back into the BC times, but Shanghai residents said that they were sweating it out, and they said it feels like the temperature is 40 degrees because of the humidity. So 40 degrees, 104 degrees Fahrenheit.
Yeah, that's dangerous level.
So they're getting pretty hot there. But staying with China, because there's a story that I wanted to get to this week because it was big news, and that is the story in China of America Mark Sweden. Now, in case you don't know who that is, we actually have talked about him here on the show before. Back in 2012, he was visiting China. He went to China to go to a factory to set up an account to buy cheap floor tiles, because that's what he does as a business in the United States. And China is well known for making floor tiles that are very, very cheap. I know, because I bought some of those floor tiles. However, when he was there in his hotel room, the police burst in and arrested him. And the charge was drug trafficking. However, Mark does not have any history of drug trafficking or taking drugs or anything to do with drugs. However, the factory that he was visiting that day for the Fuller tiles does have a connection with a large Chinese drug cartel. It turns out that the Florida tiling factory that he was visiting was mixed up in the manufacturing of meth. So anyway, they took him. They got him and took him in, put him in a Chinese prison. And after a year, they gave him a trial. And in the trial, he was found, surprise, surprise, guilty. No fingerprints, no DNA, no nothing, just a verdict of guilty.
Yeah.
Now, they were supposed to sentence him. However, they knew that there was something wrong. There was no evidence linking him to drugs in any way. So the verdict was delayed for 5 years. And after 5 years of him being in a Chinese prison, they did find him. They were already found him guilty. They sentenced him to death. And everybody was shocked. It's like, well, wait a minute. There's no evidence. In fact, supposedly some of the Chinese officials are very embarrassed by this, that he was found not only guilty, but was sentenced to death, even though there was almost literally no evidence. And it turns out that in Chinese courts, it's more important not to embarrass the police or the prosecutors by acquitting someone. That's why they almost always guilty verdicts in China.
Especially when they got a foreign guy that can blame.
But in the meantime, the family, was talking about his horrible prison conditions in China. He's attempted suicide several times. He's no longer allowed to speak to his family. The U.S. consulate's office hasn't even been allowed to visit him in a year. He's lost 130 pounds from the last time they saw him. He's been in a non-dark room for 10 years. He's constantly subjected to psychological trauma. The guards broke his hand like 5 to 7 times, dislocated his knee. He's developed holes in his face due to the extreme periodontal disease. He's forced to make silk flowers, which expose him to toxic chemicals. He's in a room with 25 other inmates where there's just a hole in the floor for a bathroom. It's freezing in the winter. It's burning hot in the summertime. So the U.S. government this week, there was an appeal. The U.S. government, they upheld his death sentence. So he will be put to death. So the U.S. government has demanded his release this week. So
took that long, took too long.
10 years. 10 years he's been in jail. They have upheld his death sentence. The only thing that they could do was commute it to life in prison. And the fact that this is all, there's literally almost no evidence at all, except that he visited the factory where they just happen to have a meth lab in the basement or whatever.
Yeah.
So the U.S. is demanding his immediate release, and China's going, no.
Wow, I didn't actually know that story.
Yeah. I mean, I've spoken about it before on here. I mean, sometimes these stories get kind of swept under the rug. The reason it's back in the news this week is because the United States demanded he be released, and the China government said, no, we're going to uphold the death. They're going to uphold his death sentence. Even though even the Chinese officials are like, oh, we're sorry to say this because, we know we don't have any evidence or anything. But, and I think that they were hoping that after many years, especially the judge in the trial, many years, that somebody else will have to be the one. Somebody else will have to one to acquit him, but not him, because they don't want to embarrass the prosecutors. So they're hoping, time will go by, and then, they could get somebody else to acquit him, but that hasn't happened in any way. He's not being acquitted, and they are going to uphold his death sentence.
Wow. That's tragic.
Do not get in trouble I don't know how this guy could have gotten out of it, but don't get in a Chinese prison.
How can you prevent yourself from going into it? Don't go to China and be visiting Lord Kyle.
You can't say that.
I was on my way to China.
Don't go to China.
He spooked me completely. Because I'm supposed to be going to check factories out over there. That's still on my schedule.
Ladies and gentlemen, if Dan Kang does not show up on the show next week, it's because he's in a Chinese prison. But speaking of being in prison, Dan, you remember Julian Assange? Remember that guy?
Yeah.
Julian Assange, who was drug out of the Ecuadorian embassy by his hand. They put him. The police have this. Sometimes they put your hands behind your back, and then they carry your feet when you won't walk, and they drag you out. So they drug him out, because, he has been in trouble for having those U.S. secret documents that he got, some from the Russians, some he got from somebody he tricked into giving him to him. And he posted them on his website, WikiLeaks, during the presidential race in 2016, because remember, Trump said, "I love WikiLeaks." So anyway, Julian Assange has been sitting in a jail in the UK there on appeal, trying not to go to the United States, because if he goes to the United States and he gets found guilty, which he will, he's looking at 170 years in jail. So in other words, for the rest of his life. And he will be tried on the Espionage Act. How ironic is that?
Yeah. I was going to mention Julian Assange earlier when we were talking about.
You can't write a script better than this. So anyway, this week, Julian Assange lost every single appeal.
Well, yeah.
The judge said, no, none of this is any good. You're going to the United States, buddy.
Yeah, he's finally coming up.
There's nothing we can do about this. So he's going there to the United States. I mean, partly because of the information he got from Chelsea Manning, who had to go to jail as well for stealing classified material and giving it to Julian Assange. And Julian Assange, who in some cases, I have to say, is an idiot. U.S. secrets on his website about a whole host of things. Diplomatic State Department cables, the Iraq war-related reports on capture, the information on capturing terrorists, the terrorists that were being held in the United States. All of this was in this, secret classified stuff, and he put it up on the web. What did he think was going to happen? But I mean, this is an interesting argument, and you'll have to comment on this, Dan. Is at what point do we say what is freedom of expression?
That's right. He's had a lot of supporters, and he's had a lot of people that were against him, and it is an interesting subject because there are some things that I believe that the public should know, and but then on the other hand, I don't know where we draw that line.
What is the line for journalists? Can they? If they managed to get what he got was thousands and thousands of pages of classified documents thrown in his lap,
right?
Should we be allowed to post that on the web? As free press?
As much as we believe that we should make that public to the world, it could damage a lot of lives as well. So.
People's lives are in danger. People in Iraqis' lives are in danger that are helping the United States.
That's right.
And of course, the Iraqis think that it should be published.
We talked about the other issue too. Is we have players and agents that are around the world, and their lives could be at stake if their identity was to be, found out or exposed. I have a direct relation with that because my father was actually in intelligence, and he actually was in intelligence in Vietnam. He was in Army intelligence, and he did spy stuff in Vietnam as well. And there was actually a ransom out for his head in Vietnam. There was a contract out for his head, but his very survival depended on the fact that they didn't actually know his real identity. He was actual adjutant general. He worked directly under the Delmani family. His commanding officer was one of the Delmani family heirs. And he later on became the human resources director for the Delmani Lodge, which is now Pebble Beach, for 23 years. He got that job because after Vietnam, he got shot and injured after 2 tours. He had to bring the family. This is before I was born. He had to bring the family to America because at that time, Korea was still a third world nation. The U.S. military said, look, we cannot keep your family secure because there's a contract out for you. And if they found out who you were, you and your family could be in danger. So you need to come to the U.S. You need to bring your family. That's how my family ended up in the U.S. through my father in the military service. And then, so my point is that, his identity was top secret. There's another story later on when I came back to Korea to find out about my family, but we can talk about that another time. But yeah, Yeah, he was a covert operator.
I forgot what we were talking about. What was the story we were talking about?
Yeah,
That's a great story. That's a great. We'll have to make a whole show about this story of
Yeah,
Dave King's family.
Snowden revealing top secret. I mean, if some of those names got out, those people would be in danger. So that was the point.
It's interesting you should say this because we're getting to the end here. But there was a secret conversation that leaked out of North Korea this week, which I remembered. I don't know if you heard that Kim Jong-un he had all his local officials together. And they issued an order over the whole country that was supposed to be done in secret, but somehow it leaked out, which is a lot of things are more things are leaking out of North Korea. And that is the new law in North Korea that committing suicide is now against the law. And as of now, killing yourself is now banned in North Korea. Yeah. And if you kill yourself, you now face the penalty of death if you're found guilty. I don't know. I just made that last part up. But the other part is true that that they're having a problem right now in North Korea. That people are killing themselves. It seems the suicide rate has skyrocketed in North Korea. In May, suicides are up 40% in North Korea, and they have been several emergency meetings now to try and figure out a way to contain people that want to kill themselves.
Yeah, feed them and give them freedom.
Feed them
and free them.
That's not on the table. I don't think that is on the table because Kim Jong-un said, according to this report, he called the act of suicide that suicide is an act of treason against socialism and against the country, and said that if people commit suicide, if people commit suicide, the local authorities that have the jurisdiction where that suicide happened are now to be held accountable for that suicide.
And your entire family. So they're turning that influence on them.
If you're, I'm sure the family's going to be. But can you imagine if you're the official of a jurisdiction that is having a lot of suicide, problems with people? You got to be nervous because now it's your fault. It's your fault that people are committing suicide.
Yeah, I don't know if it's going to raise the suicide rate, maybe. But one of the most interesting things I found out about this is that this meeting that Kim had with his officials somehow got out of the country. There's a lot of that we don't hear about.
But the reason that people are committing suicide is a lot of them are leaving letters behind, and they read the letters in this meeting. And that was what was so shocking, was that people were doing something that they never do. They were criticizing the government and they were criticizing Kim, and that was their reason for committing suicide. And so that's why this meeting was so secret, and the fact that this secret got out.
Yeah. Well, I mean, if you criticize, you're going to the coal mines, or you're going to be executed anyway. Yeah.
What a great way to commit suicide. Just run out and call Kim Jong-un a clown.
That's
committing suicide. They'll shoot you right there. But anyway, a lot of people are leaving letters behind. So Kim Jong-un is getting very worried. He's getting very worried that so many people in his country are committing suicide. And there was an interesting part of this that I left out, that the fact that the people that were in the meeting that have let this secret out, all their identities have to be kept very, very secret. Because if they find it, now I'm sure there weren't that many people in the meeting, so Kim's going to know, hey, somebody in that meeting, one of these 25 or 30 people in the meeting, is the one that leaked this out to the foreign press. So he's. But
this isn't a real new trend, though. This isn't a new trend. I mean, they made it just leaked out, and we made the free world maybe just hearing about this, but that's not a new trend. That's been happening a lot. Within the last 10 years. Yeah, I'm proud of it.
Imagine. I mean, if you're living on what's the average salary in North Korea now? Like 5 pesos a day or something. It's incredibly ridiculously low. and there's no food. There's nothing to eat. And you're lived in constant fear.
Food
is the military and I read this other story is, how does Kim Jong-un spend his billions? Which is a great story. It's on Facebook. Because he has billions of dollars because money that comes in, he gets it. And first thing they do is they feed and pay the salaries of all the military, which is one of the largest militaries in the world. And the problem is, if you live out in the, in the province, you gotta grow your own stuff.
Yeah. Well, which is interesting because, I spent a lot of time with North Koreans. In Korea, when we were part of our association, we have a nonprofit organization. But the Koreans naturally, like the country Koreans, they're very, very, very educated on plants, like what's edible, what's poisonous. They just know all of that from years have passed down because you have to from survival. That's right. They know, and not just what to eat, but what the health benefits are. It's amazing some of the wisdom and the information education that they have on herbage, on wild plants, and that's just regular like knowledge that they have that's passed down from generations.
Wow. I can see, but speaking of knowledge of things, we have to have enough knowledge to close the show here because we are out of time. But for all the people there in North Korea, our hearts go out to you. Please don't commit suicide because you're looking at penalty of death. I actually just made that up. That's not really true, but I could see that happening. But the
families are the ones that's going to suffer.
Families are the ones that are going to suffer if you kill yourself. So don't kill yourself. But for me and Dan Kang, some interesting stories this week, Dan. A lot of stuff to get to. But we'll be back again next week and pick up where we left off. And so for me, Eric Lecain, and Dan Kang here on the World News Jam on DZRJ and RJTV, everybody be safe out there, and we will see you next week.
The views and comments of the hosts and guests are not necessarily